All right, so today we're talking about midpoints and bisectors. So the first little paragraph, we're going to fill in our blanks. It says the blank of a segment. We're going to fill in midpoint here. The midpoint of a segment is the point halfway between the endpoints of a segment. Okay, the midpoint of a segment is the point halfway between the endpoints, in the middle, okay? Well, if I have a point that is in the middle of two endpoints, what could we say about those two smaller segments? What did we talk about yesterday? They would be what? They would be congruent, okay? A point is, this is called equidistant. That means equal in distance, okay? Equidistant means equal in distance. A point is equidistant from other points if it is the same distance. That's what I just said, okay? From them. It is equidistant, meaning the same distance from other points. And then the question I just asked would be the last blank. The midpoint separates the entire segment into two congruent segments. So they will give you a picture and they will say that something is the midpoint. That would then trigger you to say, okay, well, I know it's in the middle, which means the two smaller pieces are going to be congruent to each other. Okay, so this is what I talked about on day one when I said that geometry is a lot of things that you have to remember. We define things, and then it's just going to say M is the midpoint of AB. That's going to have to trigger your brain to say, okay, midpoint is in the middle. That means the two segments are congruent to each other. Okay, so these are the things that I'm talking about in geometry that you just have to remember as we go through these. Is everybody okay with that? All right. Now, let's take a look at this key concept here. There's nothing to fill in, but I want to talk about what it says. It says if segment AB has an endpoint, and they call it x sub 1. That's just a subscript to differentiate between the two variables, okay? And then it also has an endpoint of x sub 2 on a number line. So x sub 1 and x sub 2, those are my endpoints for segment AB. To find the midpoint of it, we find what's in the middle. We just take the average. You add those 2 points together, and you divide by 2. And that's what this little formula is right here. Okay, to find the midpoint on a number line, you take the two endpoints, you add them together, and you divide by 2. If you want to make a little note of that out here, you add the two endpoints, and then divide by 2. Okay, this is on a number line. If you want to find the midpoint, you add the two endpoints and you divide it by 2. It's like finding the average of the two numbers, what's in the middle of them. Is everybody okay with that? Now look at that example that's right under there. Excuse me. We want to find the coordinate of the midpoint of xz. Okay, so look for point x on your number line. Where is that at? What's the coordinate of that point? Okay, so we're going to take -3. And then we're going to add the coordinate of the other endpoint z. What is the coordinate of z? 8. And then we're going to divide that by 2. Does everybody understand where I got those numbers from? X is at -3. Z is at +8. So I add those two together. I add -3 plus 8. And then I'm going to divide that by 2. Let's see, what's -3 plus 8? 5. And 5 divided by 2. We can leave it as a fraction, but most of you probably are more comfortable with a decimal. And so that would be 2.5. Go ahead and do the same thing for the next example. Find the midpoint of AF. Look at A, what's its coordinate? Look at F, what's its coordinate? add the two together, and divide by 2. If you need a calculator, you're welcome to borrow one of mine up front. If you're not comfortable with your math, give me just a second. Let me erase this. I'll be right there.
Right.
What do we get for the coordinate of the midpoint of AF? 1. All right, let's look at A. A is, whoops, that's not what I meant. I meant to get a highlighter. A is at -5. F is at 7. So we're going to take -5, add 7, divide by 2. Whoops. Which gives me 1. Anybody have any questions? All right. Sure? Okay.
I was going to ask you, how are you supposed to know when to do this and when to do this, but you tell about it.
And it'll say what's the coordinate of the midpoint. That's a trigger to add them and divide by 2. All right, let's look at this other example. Okay. It says Kenneth travels from his school on 38th Street. I can't hardly see those streets. Okay, so that's right where he is on his skateboard. To the library on 62nd Street. He stops halfway there to take a break. Where does he stop? Now, is there a number line on this one for me to add and divide by 2? No, but it's a picture, so what can I just do? If he starts here at 38th Street and he ends here at 62nd Street, how do we figure out what's in the middle?
Go to the middle.
Yeah, but how do you know which one's in the middle? You count. It's got to be what from either side?
2.
It's got to be even. It's got to be equal, equidistant, same distance from the middle. Okay, so what I would do is I would probably say, all right, if I start where he is, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places, right? Halfway through 6 is how many? 3. So I'm going to do it again. Count 1, 2, 3. So guess where he starts or stops? 50th Street. Okay. So if they give you a picture like that, just count halfway between. Everybody good with that one? Okay. So it gives you this long paragraph. It gives you this picture. It makes it seem like it's a hard question, but in reality, you just look at it and count. Okay. Now, here's the difference between what we just did and what we're about to do. It is still the midpoint. Okay. However, we were just doing a midpoint on a number line. That's just where we can add and divide by 2, or you can just also count and cut in half. What we're doing now is midpoints on a coordinate plane. Everybody know what a coordinate plane is? Your graph, right? You remember your graph? That's a coordinate plane. Well, on a coordinate plane, we have ordered pairs. What comes first? With 2 variables, x and y. Which one comes first in my ordered pair? X, okay, and then y. So what we're going to do is we're going to be given 2 points, 2 endpoints, and we're going to be asked to find what the midpoint is. So I have one ordered pair. We're going to call that x1 and y1. And then my second ordered pair is also an x and a y, but to make sure they're separate, I'm going to call it x2 and y2. That's just to differentiate between which points I'm using. Is everybody okay with that? Now, on a number line, we took them and what did we do to them? What operation did we do? On the other side of the notes, what did we do? We took the numbers and we added and divided by 2, right? So we're going to do exactly the same thing here, with the exception of I have actually 4 different numbers. So when I find my midpoint, I'm going to have to add the like pieces together. That stands for midpoint, by the way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add my 2 x's together. x1 plus x2. and then I'm going to divide that by 2, and that gives me my new x value. Then I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but I'm going to add my 2 y values and divide by 2. And then I have an ordered pair answer of a new x and a new y. So you're still doing the same thing. It's just we have 2 values. We have x's and we have y's that we're going to have to add together. Now, I will give you that formula for your quiz next week, okay? So you don't have to memorize it. I will write it down midpoint on a coordinate plane, and I will put that formula for you. All right. Is everybody okay so far? All of that is actually written right there on your notes. I'll highlight it for you. I just wrote it on the board. There's your formula right there. And a PQ has endpoints. I forgot to fill that in, sorry. It had endpoints at P and Q, and then to find the midpoint, we use that formula. So that is all right there on your paper. You don't need to copy down what I wrote. It's right there for you. So let's start with the next example. It says we want to find the coordinates of M, which is the midpoint of segment AB. What are the 2 values for A, the x and y for A? -2 and 1. And what about for B? 8 and 3. So what I do to help myself stay organized is I label point A as my x1 and y1. I label my point B as my x2 and my y2. So what I'm going to do right above those is I'm going to put x1, y1, and I'm going to put x2 and y2. Why label it? Because then all I have to do is look at what I have labeled, plug it into my formula, and work it out. Okay, so on your paper, right above the ordered pair for A, put x1 and y1, and right above your ordered pair for B, put x2 and y2. Are we ready? All right, so we're going to find M. What did I label as x1? -2, okay. Plus x2, which would be 8, and I'm going to divide that by 2. Then I'm going to go ahead and set up for my y's as well. What did I call y1? 1. Plus, what did I call y2? Okay, and I'm going to divide that by 2. No, you can do this separately, or you can do it in your calculator. You can do -8 plus 2 and divide it by 2. What's -8 plus 2? -2 plus 8 is how much? Before I divide, what is it? 6. Okay, -2 plus 8 is 6. Again, if you're not comfortable with your integer addition, use a calculator. You have a tool, use it. So 6, and then we're going to divide that by 2, which would give me 3. So that's the x value for my midpoint. And then it is going to, we're going to do the same thing for the other one. I'm going to add 1 plus 3, and then divide that by 2. 2. So my midpoint for that line segment is the ordered pair 3, 2. Everybody okay with that? Okay. Go ahead and try the next example. It gives you your new points. It gives you your new end points. And it wants you to find the coordinate of its midpoint. But this time they're calling the midpoint B. That doesn't really matter. Again, to stay organized, I would recommend label your first point as x1, y1. Label your second point as x2, y2. And then just plug it into your formula that's on your paper. Yes, I have it right there. Looking like I'm getting all my answers. I think that's a good sign. Let's go over this last one. Again, if you followed what I said, we're going to label our endpoints as x1, y1, x2, y2. And then I'm going to plug it in to find my midpoint. x1 plus x2 divided by 2. y1 plus y2 divided by 2. What's negative 3 plus 5? 2, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. All right. What's negative 2 plus 10? 8, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. And that is what I saw on most everybody's paper is the ordered pair 1, 4. Anybody have any questions? Okay, again, the difference. If it's a number line, you just add and divide by 2. If it's ordered pairs, you're still doing the same thing. Just add the x's divided by 2, add the y's divided by 2.